Shalom, everyone. The Sovereignty Movement is launching a series of Zoom meetings with public opinion shapers and makers to discuss a little more in depth the issues of the war and what should Israel do for victory. And today we have the pleasure and the honor to be with Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve, Attorney Maurice Hirsch. Maurice Hirsch is the director of the Initiative for the Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and a senior legal analyst at Human Rights Voices. He served for 19 years in the IDF Military Advocate General Corps. In his last position, he served as director of the military prosecution in Judea and Samaria. Shalom, Attorney Maurice Hirsch.
Shalom, Nadia. Thank you for having me. Thank you for including me in this great lineup.
Our first question, we hear all the time and we see and we feel the American pressure for humanitarian aid for those in Gaza who really were complete partners to the massacre and pogrom against the Jews. How can Israel push off that pressure when, on the other hand, America also gives us weapons, etc., and aid?
So I think the subject of aid for the Gazans and the push of the Biden administration on this subject is almost entirely immoral. It's a one-sided effort that is only supporting the Palestinians, the Arabs in Gaza, and only them. It neglects entirely the fact that there are 120,000 Israelis who have been displaced, who are now refugees in our own country after their houses were destroyed, burned, and their families murdered. It completely ignores the fact that, amongst other things, the terrorists in Gaza took 242, at least, hostages from the brutal massacre on the 7th of October, and they are now holding them in Gaza excommunicado. They are not allowing anyone to see them. They're not allowing anyone in, whilst the International Committee for the Red Cross was quick to condemn Israel. Well, they're not doing anything to even demand that they be allowed access to those hostages. They're still demanding that they be allowed access to the terrorists in Israeli prisons. But it doesn't work when it comes to the Israelis and Jews being held in Gaza. They have leverage over these terrorists. They just refuse to use it. Similarly, now what we've been seeing in the last few days is the terrorists in Gaza have been holding foreign nationals hostage in Gaza. They haven't let them out. They haven't let them flee the area. And now, just in the last few days, together with Egypt has opened its border. The terrorist Hamas, ISIS, have allowed these foreign nationals to leave as part of that humanitarian effort, of course. But what they've done is that they've conditioned the release of the foreign nationals on the provision of fuel to Gaza. Now, fuel to Gaza is not a humanitarian subject. Fuel to Gaza goes to help the Hamas to ISIS war effort. They use the fuel. What they've done in the last 20 years is they've abused the humanitarian aid for reconstructing so-called Gaza to build 500 kilometers of underground tunnels. They live in those tunnels, as one of their leaders, Musa Abu Marzouk, recently explained. They built the tunnels to defend their terrorist capabilities. They don't give a damn about the Gazan population, which is why they're not allowing them to take refuge there. And so we've seen that a constant abuse of humanitarian aid. Now the fuel that's going into Gaza in return for the release of the foreign hostages, not the hostages that they took on the 7th of October, but those that they've been holding as hostages for the fuel. They use that fuel to power the ventilation systems for their tunnels. That's their war effort. The longer they can stay underground, the longer they can stay hidden, the longer they can keep the hostages that they took on the 7th of October hidden underground, that is part of their war effort. So really what President Biden is saying to Israel, help Hamas, ISIS promote its own war effort. That is something which is completely immoral. At the same time, what he's saying to them is, and to Israel, you have to help the Gazans, many of whom actually support Hamas and are willing human shields for Hamas, whilst at the same time turn a complete blind eye to the needs of our population and of our hostages. Humanitarian considerations should be a two-way street. We, Israel, have always said we do not have a fight with the innocent population in Gaza. We would like to see them prosper. We would like to see them live in peace as partners in developing the region. But that goes both ways. That humanitarian aid cannot be one-sided. It cannot be a one-way street. And when President Biden pushes Israel to neglect its own citizens and the needs of its own citizens, and to help Hamas and those same people who support Hamas, that is the height of immorality. And that, I think, is what needs to be explained to President Biden and his team. That's how we stand up to them. It isn't at the expense of weapons. It's humanitarian considerations in response for a humanitarian response. Jews, I've got news for President Biden and his team. Jews are human beings as well. And Jewish lives matter too.
So, Attorney Maurice Hirsch, what is victory for Israel? What exactly is victory? Let's start with that.
Victory I see for Israel is entirely decimating to its core the entire terrorist framework, capabilities, infrastructure in Gaza. It means killing as many of the terrorists as possible. It means destroying every single part of their terror infrastructure, leaving nothing, no remnant of it, destroying all 500 kilometers of underground tunnels, destroying in that framework the underground tunnels, bunkers, arms, weapon storage areas that these despicable Nazi-like terrorists have hidden under the Shifa hospital, the biggest hospital in Gaza, intentionally using the sick, intentionally using the hospital as human shields, because that's what they do. They have no respect for human life. They have no respect for human decency, which is why they simply need to be eradicated. Hamas, the PFLP, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, all of them need to, and all of the others. There are some 12 different terrorist groups running around in Gaza, happily promoting their goal of killing Jews. They all, to their last man, need to be destroyed. Those who continue to fight, killed, and those who are caught, put on trial for their crimes, and receive the punishment that is befitting them. I would advocate also for, in this case, the death sentence, similar to what Israel did with Adolf Eichmann. These are Nazi-like people committing Nazi-like acts, and therefore the response should be a Nazi-like punishment.
But after that, let's imagine that we do and that we succeed in doing everything you just described. Who will be in charge of the area? We hear, to our deep outrage, I must admit, that there are talks about having our sons fight now in Gaza, and unfortunately also being wounded and worse. And then we hear that the international pressure is that after our boys do the dirty work, we're supposed to, according to international pressure, hand over the area to the PA control or to the UN or to some other international force. And we feel that that's something that has to be completely fought. And we want to know if you agree with that cannot happen. And also, how can Israel make sure that doesn't happen? And what is your opinion on this issue?
Is at the end of the military operations, after we finishing getting rid of every last terrorist, Israel needs to continue to hold the Gaza Strip for the foreseeable future. It cannot be even a thought in anyone's mind to bring back the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority controlled Gaza for 10 years. The Palestinian Authority and the Oslo process in general is what brought us the October 7 massacre. It's that education to hatred. It's the demonization of Jews. It's the use of Nazi propaganda by the Palestinian Authority to dehumanize Jews. That's what the Palestinian Authority did in Gaza. And so the idea of now giving the Palestinian Authority that already in 2007 were thrown out of Gaza by Hamas, thrown out of Gaza by the people of Gaza, the idea of now giving them the prize that on the bodies and on the blood of 1,400 victims, they will suddenly be carried in as victors into Gaza. That, in my mind, is really probably the most immoral thing I've ever heard, and the most ridiculous thing. We have to remember, Nadia, the Palestinian people hate the Palestinian Authority. They see it more of a burden than anything else. They hate.
Yeah, but according to the polls, they love Hamas. We have to the fact that they hate the PA.
That's exactly it. They most of the population, if given the opportunity to vote again, would again, as they did in 2006, vote for Hamas. So this idea of giving over Gaza to a body that is completely hated by the local, even by the local population, and that is simply focused on, let's put it into context, Nadia. The Palestinian Authority, the PLO, has one central goal: to destroy Israel. And so this idea of again giving them control of another area on the blood of the 1,400 victims is simply outrageous. And it doesn't even take into account the fact that the Gazans don't want them. They don't want them. And now we hear even crazier things coming from the Palestinian Authority. We have the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister saying his condition to even receive Gaza is that he gets a state. Are you really serious? Can anyone even dream of the idea of giving the Palestinian Authority a state, giving them a prize for murdering 1,400 people and injuring another 5,000? That is ludicrous. The Palestinian Authority has to pay a price, and a high price, for the 7th of October, because that's what they brought upon us and themselves.
Thank you very much. Your words were very fascinating. Also, we want to say, as Judith said to you in Hebrew, to say kol hakavod, that you brought the issue of the payments by the Palestinian Authority who are paying terrorists who kill Jews. You brought that to the government, and you're fighting against that. And we want to wish you continued kol hakavod, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hope it'll be a success. Hope it'll be a success, and the government will make the right decision.
We also hope so, and that is one of the purposes of this Zoom session and meetings with different public opinion shapers who are saying things very clearly, like you just did.
Thank you very much.